Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. All right, on today's podcast, we have a special guest, Eric Woodruff, who is a PhD and a CEM, and he is the past president of the Association of Energy Engineers. So I guess every energy engineer in the world, you were their president. Is that right, Eric?
Well, I mean, that would be nice to believe, but I couldn't go that far. But yeah, it's an association. It's 100 countries, so it's well known.
Yeah, and I was looking at your website too, and I was kind of impressed that you had other presidents there. And so you had presidents and then people that should have been presidents. So I saw that there was Bush 2, there was Clinton, and then there's Gore. And I think that he should have been president if he would have stormed the Capitol or something like that, or if they would have counted all the votes. And then if Arnold Schwarzenegger was born in the U.S., maybe he would have been president too. But what was it like meeting all those other guys there?
So for context, if you go to the Association of Energy Engineers webpage, you can find pictures of that. But if you go to ericwoodruff.com, it directs you to that too. And the context is the association would hire keynote speakers, and then I would get the luxury of interviewing them.
Awesome.
And so I got to interview T. Boone Pickens and all the other people you just mentioned. And, it was a great experience. I'd say the takeaway from those interviews was at the end, I would ask them what's their secret to success. And each one would have a unique answer. And I thought that was kind of cool to hear that. But Schwarzenegger, for example, his was like, be useful, and
you don't want to argue with him.
Others, let's see, Al Gore, I remember he'd say early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and stay organized or something like that. Uh-huh. And, it was just, I thought the people in the audience, we all can do the technical thing, but hearing someone's personal side has always been interesting. And those full interviews, a lot of them are available, I think, on the AEE website. So anyway.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what is the Association of Energy Engineers. So I'm in the solar and energy storage industry, and we're always out there getting NABCEP certified. And I know there's a lot more out there, and I know you do a lot of teaching too.
Yeah, so AEE has been around since the last conflict we had with Iran, which 1977 is where that
wasn't my
energy...
fault. Yeah.
What's that?
It wasn't my fault, that last conflict.
Yeah. No. I just remember as a kid waiting around the block for my parents to be able to get gasoline. I think if you're old enough, you remember. Over 55, you might remember. But yeah, so the need for more energy management, particularly in buildings, also, fleets and things like that. But I would say AEE was born out of a passion to be more energy independent and save money across the buildings and business, stocks, types of energy users. And then that's 1977, 1981, they invented the Certified Energy Manager program, which if I had the workbook it's a pretty big 1 week long course.
Oh, so that's a CEM, Certified Energy Manager, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at that keynote that I was given a couple weeks ago in New York,
when I met you,
I think about a third, where we met, I think about a third of the audience were CEMs. I might be wrong. Maybe it's 25%. I don't know. But that's probably the most, it's been around since 81, and it's recognized. There's people from 100 countries have attended. Well over 100,000 people have been trained in the CEM. And so for commercial, or non-residential buildings, it's a really good practical course and test on how to save energy in industrial and regular buildings too. So yeah, all of that is true.
Yeah, it sounds like a good thing for people to do that are in the solar and storage industry to diversify a little bit, to get a CEM.
It's up to you. Mm-hmm. I have that kind of CEM background. And I have 2 solar systems myself that I paid someone else to install, and I see a lot of value in their knowledge. And, energy is such a big field now, it's hard to be an expert in everything. So I think everyone is needed, really. The solar, and I'm a big believer in that. In my house, this whole operation is carbon neutral, or it was carbon neutral until I bought my third electric car. Now I've got to do... I got to do a little better,
Man, those electric cars are bad for the environment, huh?
Oh, I'm not going to say that. No, if you run so this is the skill set. You probably know this, but maybe some listeners don't. Even I have a coal-fired power plant 5 miles from my house because I live in Kentucky near a lake, and there's a nice coal-fired and gas-fired plant there. And even if you have a Tesla here or an electric car and you just charge from the grid, I've run the numbers, whether you're in many states, Ohio, Kentucky, Oklahoma, all those places that have a lot of coal plants, your emissions from an electric car would be only about a third of what the emissions from an internal combustion engine, even if you fully charge from coal. Now, I have these solar systems in that bucket, but sometimes at night, yeah, I'm charging and it is coal. But even in that scenario, you're better off. Now, I'm not addressing the whole production batteries and all that stuff, but on an emissions operations perspective, I've actually recorded webinars on that too that go through the math on that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's why I have a rooftop coal plant for nighttime energy when the sun's not out. You know?
I can tell you're going to be funny. Okay.
Yeah, and so the Association of Energy Engineers and getting a CEM and all that kind of stuff, is that related?
Well, a lot of people would say it's integral and maybe a prerequisite. I'd even call it like a license to learn. It's one of the most foundational. It covers everything from boilers to chillers to industrial to HVAC, windows, lights, basic electric systems, power factor correction, energy storage, performance contracting, all of those things, right? But it covers all those things in a very basic level, like a mile wide, inch deep kind of smorgasbord of useful energy management, strategies. And, many people will take that course and then they'll see something they really like, and then they'll do another more specialized course. I would say the CEM is kind of like a basic pilot's license, and then you might go on further to become a jet or multi-engine or IFR pilot.
What kind of pilot are you?
I was a private pilot. I did have that back in 1990.
Yeah, I was too, and I haven't done much since the engine failure,
Yeah, that's a big bummer. I mean, both of us are sailors, and everything with navigation in an airplane is the same as a sailboat. It's just, 100 times faster, and if, like you said, you lose the engine, it's more of a problem than with a sailboat,
Yeah, you got backup. But we actually do have a lot of trouble with keeping our fuel clean. Because, you need a motor to get into the dock if you're not the best sailor in the world. And we're, next to an old America's Cup sailboat, and going in there, you don't want to crash into that thing. And then with a sailboat on the bay, you use the motor very small amount of the time. So it's like a gallon of gas could last you months. And so the gas gets all gunky and plugs up the filters, and then you're out on the bay, and then you're like, oh, I got to get back in. But could be a problem.
Always the worst possible time, too.
So a CEM, a certified energy manager, what would it take for just like a regular solar person to get one of those?
Yeah, so there's a kind of a mix of experience and education that's required. Traditional pathway is, there are many people with a 4-year degree in some type of technical field. Doesn't have to be anything specific. Doesn't have to be engineering. I have a physics degree, for example. But people with that kind of technical, if they have a 4-year degree and they only need 3 years experience in the field. Now, if you don't have the degree, we have many CEMs that are people that came up through the trades, who have a lot of experience, 10 years experience or so. They can still become a CEM if they have 10 years and no degree. And so there's kind of a mix. But it's a pathway. There's other certifications if you're just starting in energy that you can kind of work up to it. And, another step that's real popular is people coming right out of college might take the CEM exam, which is a hard test. Its passing rate is only in the 70s, and it's been that way for, I guess, 50 years or so. But they could pass the test, and then when they accumulate 3 years, then they automatically become a CEM. And in the interim, they'd be called an energy manager in training. And I've hired EMITs. It says a lot if you pass that test.
Okay.
In fact, a lot of government agencies require a CEM or EMIT just to be as part of the job.
Okay. So I met you a little while ago over at you gave a talk. You were a keynote speaker for Big Shine Energy, and it's a great group. I was actually their keynote speaker in Texas 3 years ago, and they have a lot of positive energy, speaking of energy, things like that. And so they help people make projects happen for like solar and storage and lighting and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed your speech. And I remember one of the things that you were talking about is you were looking at the California duck curve, and you said something, let's see, I took a picture of your slide. And so it said 2025 for California ISO independent system operator, for 66% of the days, grid demand was powered by 100% renewables for a significant part of the day. That sounds like a pretty good statistic.
Yeah, you can look it up. It's CAISO. And also that number is even better in 2026.
Sure.
You guys are already... A really neat guy who tracks all that data is Mark Jacobson, is a professor at Stanford, and he has a great LinkedIn profile and with all kinds of graphs showing you that. But even, California's even more renewable in 2026, and if the batteries keep helping with, storing energy, excess energy, and then using it in the afternoon, evening, they'll continue to become more and more renewable by hour every single year, which is great.
Okay, great. So you do a lot of keynote speaking. How did that evolve?
I don't know.
Just one thing leads to another. Huh?
This is going back.
Besides being a great keynote speaker. Yeah.
I think it's that I had worked on carbon accounting and energy management and was training. And some people had asked me, hey, we have a group of folks, they don't want to do a 5-day certification-based test at the end training. We just want like a 4-hour primer or a 1-day kind of course without a test at the end. And so I started doing that, I think, for utilities and ESCOs, energy service companies. And, it's kind of a nice trade-off for them because they don't have to lock up their people for a whole week and take a test. And there's a lot of expense with that too. But that's been an effective kind of, mini course, or here's the top 10 practical things you can do. And I think it's helpful because every month we're doing the CEM. So every month I'm interfacing with 20 to 60 people that are telling me where they're at with their energy management, programs, pitfalls, things like that. And so we're kind of really tight with the customer that way, that we have our fingers on the pulse. And so then we bring that to a keynote, much like a lot of people don't know about the CAISO curve or other things that utilities are doing, like building on KVA right now. And there's literally like 10, 15% that many customers are being penalized, but they don't know because they're not being billed they're being billed in a different way, or it's kind of hidden. So those kinds of really practical things that pay back in like 2 years or 50% return are, things we can talk about and benefit anyone, whether or not they're taking a test or not.
Okay. So how does that work getting billed by KVA? So KVA would be called apparent power?
Yeah.
Is there a good way to explain that to?
It's hard without graphics, but I'll just say there's like something called the power factor triangle. And if your power factor is not perfect, normally you would be penalized in a line item on your bill called power factor penalty. Well, that's if they bill in KW. And a lot of utilities, Louisiana Gas and Electric and Kentucky Utilities and a bunch of others, have removed the line item power factor penalty, because if you were below 90, they'd probably charge you. And now they just switched to KVA, which is probably a more pure way to bill anyway. A lot of new developing countries bill on KVA. But because they've made that change, if you're 98% power factor, under the old way, you wouldn't be penalized at all. But under the new way, you'd actually still be penalized until you're 100%. And so it's hard to explain, but if you think about a triangle on this, I can't do this without, there we go. If you think about a triangle, this thumb would be the KW, and this angle here with the hypotenuse would be the KVA. What you're interested in is minimizing the cosine of that. So if you make the angle 0, that's perfect power factor. If you have more and more angle, you're working harder and harder to do the same amount of KW. If you're below 100%, in a lot of places you're being billed. And some of it can be, one of my clients just around the corner here, and they're not a huge place. Maybe they spend, $100,000 a year on energy. They're wasting $15,000 on power factor charges. It's they're not even aware that it's happening, and it's easily fixed. Yeah.
And so how would you fix something like that?
Well, you'd install, this is stuff we cover in the CM. It's not hard. You'd install what's called our capacitors. Here's where you have power factor problems. Anytime you have a motor. So if you have a HVAC system with motors, pumps, I mean, a sawmill would be the ultimate example of a lot of motors.
Oh, I've got one. I actually do have one. So.
You have a sawmill or
Of course,
motors?
obviously. Yeah, I have a sawmill. Yeah.
Okay.
Never used it. It came with this property I have. I'm building a solar training center. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. Real estate, in California is kind of expensive. So
now I got to start worrying about my darn apparent power with that sawmill. And,
yeah, if you looked at the bill and you saw a power factor penalty, you'd know. But you just would install capacitors to basically offset that cosine a vector in the opposite direction, and that's how you fix that. Sorry to get so trig on you here. I didn't mean to go there.
Okay, so I'll just go pull out my trigonometry and get some cosines going on and turn on the sawmill, and it'll be great. Yeah. So the apparent power, the kVA that people are billed for, does that have anything to do with what the utility's given you, or is it all the customer?
It's hard to explain this without graphs, and I'm happy if you can probably watch YouTube videos. Actually, I have some free YouTube videos that you can find on my website or AEE, Association of Energy Engineers resources page.
We'll put all this in the show notes.
Yeah, that would help. The graphics will really help you understand. But it is, a situation where any facility that has a fair number of motors, what happens is just the motor the fact that you're going from electrical, pure sine wave energy to magnetic energy to rotate a motor. Anytime you go from electric energy to magnetic energy, you are impacting, it's called lagging power factor. And the utility then has to work hard to overcome your little problems that you're sending back on the grid. So motors, welding devices that are magnetic based welding, in arc furnaces, the things like that, inductive stove tops, things like that have magnetic energy are going to create problems for you on the power factor side. And the utility knows this and they'll bill you for it. I actually have a little video on LinkedIn. I did a quick demonstration that you can find also.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. Okay. Yeah, one way I kind of look at it is if voltage and current were perfectly in phase with each other, then apparent power, or kVA, would be the same thing as power, and there would be no reactive power. And reactive power is kind of that portion where current's going positive when voltage is going negative, and vice versa. And then with large utility scale solar farms, sometimes they require them to make reactive power. And so that would stabilize the voltage of the grid and things like that. So what happens when the grid is just giving you the power factor that's not perfect, which is pretty much all the time? Does that help or hurt the customer? Do you still need those capacitors? And I know too that inverters do have capacitors in them, but inverters can be made to work with the power factor, which is kind of interesting.
Well, that's, interesting question. I haven't had that question come up very much. Utilities like to think their power is perfect, and they can measure that in a way to make you believe that's true. I don't know.
That's why I like to use the centimeter yardstick. I always thought like you can have different tape measures that are off when you're showing the building inspector, and stuff like that. But anyway.
Yeah, I would say utilities, for the most part, they're supposed to be delivering you a power factor 99, 100. But they can have things like, well, our voltage is plus or minus 10%. Well, plus or minus 10% on 480 volts is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And if you're in a place like a magnetic resonance or CT machine or X-ray, if you have 10% plus voltage, you're going to end up with 10% more radiation, which isn't good for the patients unless you have some downstream filtering. So it's something to pay attention to, but I can't say it's my assessing utility power at the meter before it comes into your facility is not really my strong suit. So when you talk about solar fields, you're now into an area that's not mine.
So I have this little meter, they call it a kilowatt, and I plug it in the wall and it shows me power factor is one of the things it'll show me. And it's never been perfect. Not even close. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So is that different if I was plugging it into my building versus on the other side of the meter?
Well, I think, yeah, there is a difference. When you're downstream of that meter, you have the potential to get some interference because it's kind of like contamination. If you have, I can't do graphics right now, but
Well, that's all right. Most people just listen anyway to the podcast.
yeah, if the pure power is my wrist coming into my facility and I got lights, motors, and all these different fingers in my facility, if I have some power factor on my middle finger, if it's messed up, it will contaminate the other fingers until it hits the meter. So hopefully that helps.
Okay.
That was a horrible diagram.
Well,
but
I know with electronics and the things that they put in inverters, and you were saying capacitors would be included with that, we could make the power factor whatever we want. Yeah.
Sure.
And so I think probably in the future, we'll be seeing a lot of that, just like doing all kinds of different things to clean up the grid. Perhaps there's not a good enough incentive to do that right now, just with utility rates and all that, but hopefully we'll be seeing more of that in the future.
Yeah, I think even now, one of the other notorious, it's kind of like a good, bad story. If you put in what's called a variable frequency drive on a motor, you'll save lots of money if it's part load. But you'll have harmonics, and you have harmonic filters now, and even VFDs that will have harmonic and capacitor functions to make the power better. And, everything's going down as far as price for technology. But yeah, that kind of stuff it does exist and is very helpful.
So is that sort of related to the harmonics of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young?
No, I got to ask, are you an electrical engineer? Because you have that kind of acumen.
I'm not an electrical engineer. No, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know it very well. It's impressive.
Well, I've been teaching this stuff for 20 years, so it's keeping me busy.
That's great.
And I've been listening to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young a lot longer than that. So
Probably better for you.
And sometimes harmonics are good, but sometimes they're bad. And so I've also noticed too on your website that you've been to a lot of different countries working in where I've been too. So just
cool.
Some of the places that I've been to and worked at, there's like Hong Kong, South America. I've done the Caribbean, but not in person. Philippines, I even had an apartment there. China, I've done classes. Taiwan, I've been there. I didn't teach any classes. Taught a class in Australia. Taught classes in Dubai. Lebanon, also did classes. You did Jordan. I didn't do that. Almost got to Saudi Arabia. Haven't done Ukraine. Kazakhstan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Central Asia. So you've been to a lot of cool places. What did you think about Lebanon? I've been there, and I know there's a lot going on there right now, too.
Well, we have some good friends. Actually, the current president of AEE is a Lebanese person. So he's wonderful. They have a lot of neat things they're doing. I think one of the things, actually got an email on this yesterday, both Jordan and Lebanon have focused a lot on college students and training them about the energy efficiency opportunities. And I think we're ahead of the curve because like Jordan, I think went from like 8% renewable over 30 plus. I might be wrong on that, but they've made a big improvement. And when I got there in 2010 and taught the first CEM there were people that spoke 3 languages that couldn't get a job. And they're not like Saudi Arabia where they have oil, they do not. So both of those places have really actually built up their energy efficiency because energy is very limited there. They will have blackouts every day.
Sure, yeah, I remember
especially
that.
right now. So where I think that some of those places I feel in my heart we've had a huge impact because we've helped people get jobs, and there is an industry where people can, put solar panels on roofs and commercials and all that in commercial buildings and make a living for themselves while helping. And so it's just great. And then they have these students they mentor to help them kind of accelerate their training, and well, it just feels really good to be a part of that.
Yeah, there was a bunch of local people that went to the American University of Beirut, and they flew me over there a couple of different times just to get their solar company started. And I had a great time, and people were a little scared for me. They're like, oh, you're going to go to Beirut, and I've read about that place in the news. And I was walking up and down the shore of the Mediterranean, and everybody was super friendly, and we were working on it was a bread mill, a tahini factory, and some other places, and they would have blackouts all the time. So for them, the main important thing was having backup, not relying upon the grid, keeping it going. It was just like a great group of people. I think they call it the Paris of the Middle East.
Today's podcast was brought to you by optimism. Once you have optimism, everything works out.
My experience is similar to yours. Everywhere I've gone, all those countries, they're all good people. They're all trying to do the same. They're all, the government sometimes will be a little bit cross with each other, but generally, like what you said, they're really nice people everywhere doing good things. And if we all focus more on that, I think maybe we would have a better world, because there's plenty to focus on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in the United States, depending on what party you're for, half the time it's the other party's in power. So everybody's been disgruntled with their own government. You don't find too many people that always love their government.
And that's the real failure, I think, that we've made, is that this stuff should not be political issue.
Sure.
It's just kind of like good health shouldn't be a political issue. I know, because I've done it twice personally on my house and one of the buildings I own. I've had solar for 5 years plus, and I'm getting 15% return on my money every single year. And I think that that's another way it could be non-political, like Republicans and Democrats both want to have good investments. And we've kind of failed that it even got into this point where it's political. Even saying less pollution would probably be appreciated by everyone if we could have less cancer. And that somehow is now a political issue.
Except the oncologists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And their kids, their poor kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once we cure cancer.
The money side, we really should be focusing more on that, because that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I preach the same way that you do about all that kind of stuff. And I think that people just, they get too involved when whatever the news guy is shouting at them, and then they start hating one thing and loving another just because it's the opposite. We don't need to do that. There's tons of good reasons to have, homemade energy, that you have resilience, you have backup, and maybe you don't need to go to all these countries and fight for energy.
For sure.
Great.
Yeah. Well said. Love it.
All right. Ooh, well, let's keep on changing the world. So for the CEM training, are you doing that right now?
Next week.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a course that's virtual, so it's always going on.
So where do people go to sign up for your CEM trainings?
Well, I didn't want to make this commercial, but I would say you could go to this website called aeecenter.org, and on there you look for training. And the one that we describe, it's a 4 or 5 day program, is called the Premier program. And that's an experience where it's either done in a Zoom meeting and there's live Q&A, or we do it at a location. Like we have a location next month is Washington, D.C., and then a few months after that is Massachusetts. And so, that's more like a typical classroom, but the Zoom has been equally as popular because people like not having to travel and that whole thing. And then they have an on-demand version too, which, it's got its own benefit that you can push pause, because it is a tough test. And there's a lot of, we go into the stuff we were talking about earlier here about current and voltage drag lags. And, some people, myself included, would appreciate push and pause to kind of make sure we get a concept. So those three modes are, pretty popular, but there's other training you can take too. I mean, if you're into solar, I'd recommend doing a solar one. If although the CM one is the most popular general training, I really tell people, hey, study what you like, figure out what you like if you can, and go be the best in the world at that, because we need all kinds of more people to be really good at this stuff. And the demand, especially with energy prices going up with this whole data center thing and electrification, is just, in my career of doing this for a long time, I think we're pushing 40 years, really, I'd say 35 years passionately. I don't think there's been a better time. This is the best time. The energy price is high, drives people to action. And if I was getting 15% and my energy rate here is about 12 cents a kilowatt hour, 12 to 14 cents. If I'm in the Philippines and I'm paying more than twice that, or California, 2 to 3 times that, or these other places, if it was cost effective for me at 14 cents a kilowatt hour, it is for sure still going to be a really good investment if you're paying 30, 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's just common sense at that point.
Well, you heard that from Eric Woodruff, that everybody better get solar, and if you don't get solar, that just means maybe you're not so smart. I think that's kind of what it was.
I don't know if I said that, but let me give you.
I said that. I know you didn't.
I know
say
you want
that.
to end this interview, but I want to say
No,
one
we
more
don't.
thing.
We could keep going as long as you want. Yeah.
It's one of the classic. The first step is save energy, so you don't need as much. Now, my mistake of buying that additional electric car is I converted some money that was going into the oil people of their companies into my local electric utility. So it's kind of electrification, but because I did that, it's causing me some problems. But aside, put in the LED lights, do the motors, do everything you can to reduce, and you won't need to buy as many solar panels is kind of the message. I saw this one time, they had put solar panels all over this roof, and then they had incandescent lights on the inside, and it's like, oh, you could have done this with half the panels. But I'm a big believer in solar, and I love that you have a podcast dedicated to that. I mean, of all the other investments I've made, I have ground source, I have electric cars, I have solar. The solar is the best financial investment, better than my 401ks. And so I hope more people watch your podcast and really look at the facts, and make that investment.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope to take some of your classes. In fact, I just decided I'm going to go on tour and follow you to all these different places. And then I can also do your on-demand classes. One thing I like about my on-demand classes too is I can rewind them and people can rewind them. And I figured out this neat trick where I can rewind my life. And so I can just, if I do something wrong, I just go back and do it again. And that's why it appears to everyone else that I do everything right. But it's really probably about the fifth time around, so.
I like that. That's great. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for the time. And it was really great to meet you. And hopefully this helps everyone.
Well, thanks so much. I hope to see you around, and I hope we can do this again.
All right. Thanks so much, buddy. Have a good day.
Thanks, Eric Woodruff. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Find out more, go to SolarSEAN.com and get yourself NABCEP certified. Wow.